Hello, comrades. This is the first video response that I'm going to be doing for the first time since I actually started making, leftist content. The video that I found is another one of those videos that just completely misrepresents what socialism actually is, utilizing strawman arguments and false equivalencies as a method of portraying socialism as nothing more than a failure, and capitalism as the ultimate example of success. This video is fallacious, it ignores the historical accomplishments of socialism, and I'm going to give the guy who made this a free trip to Siberia. Here we go.
Recent data from the American Culture and Faith Institute has revealed that 4 in 10 of every American adult age 18 and over prefers socialism to capitalism.
Finally, those capitalist pigs will pay for their crimes, eh? Hey, comrade?
Okay, the only points that I'm gonna give this guy is for using the clip from the first Austin Powers movie, which is objectively the best Austin Powers movie.
Couple things this tells us. One, it explains how this guy was ever taken seriously.
Using Bernie Sanders as an example of a socialist at this point in time is simply ludicrous. Sanders is not a Marxist, he's not a libertarian socialist, he's not even a democratic socialist. Bernie Sanders is a social democrat, and social democracy is essentially just capitalism with a little less of that laissez-faire bullshit.
It turns out Bernie wasn't starting a socialist wave in America, he was merely riding one.
Well, I don't know about that, A lot of people in the past year or so have actually found themselves being introduced to more radicalized ideals such as Marxism-Leninism or anarchism after being exposed to Bernie Sanders' rhetoric. For a lot of people, Sanders was an introductory piece into actual leftism, rather than, pseudo-leftism that was pushed by him during his presidential campaign.
And the second thing this says is that Americans, in our obsession with fairness and equality of outcomes, we become pretty dumb about economics.
Duh. Says the guy pushing for a system that has routinely failed over and over again throughout its practice, and literally functions off of discrimination and usurping raw materials from underdeveloped third world nations, whilst having no consideration for the land or the lives of the indigenous people of those said nations.
Maybe instead of money, it's easier to think of a different medium. I'm a teacher, so let's go with grades.
But, dude, a grading system is far less complicated than any economic model. This is one of those false equivalencies I was talking about at the beginning of the video.
I give a test to my class of 20 students. I get some with A's, some with B's, a couple C's, and the vast majority end up with D's or F's. Now, from the perspective of equality of outcomes, that isn't fair. Some are clearly doing better than others. And don't tell me that they work harder. Those kids with the A's are born with privilege. They have a better home life. Their parents buy them the book on MP3 to listen to as they read, and those kids just get history. Now, those kids with D's and F's, they work hard too. They just have other things going on. It doesn't come naturally for them, and they're just not book smart. So from now on, in the name of fairness, I'm going to become a socialist teacher. I'm going to take all their grades, put them into a central pot, average them out, and give every student the same grade. Roughly a C or a C minus. Now you tell me what's going to happen.
I'm sorry that I had to play such a long clip from this guy's video, comrades. It was just necessary in order to make sure, nothing seemed like it was being taken out of context or anything. Anyways, the problem with this, other than being yet another false equivalency, is that this whole process of averaging shit out and giving everybody the same amount of whatever item it may be isn't how socialism works. Everybody seems to think that socialism or communism is just, everybody's equal. Well, that's utterly not really the case. I mean, sure, in some instances that may be true. Everybody having access to free healthcare, access to free education, that kind of shit. Economically, though, how it works is that people who need more in order to survive will be given more, and those who need less will be given less. It's a matter of necessity, not necessarily a matter of equality.
Those kids that are reading and studying to earn their A's, are they going to keep doing that if all their work earns them is just a C?
No, no, no!
So in the next test, a couple of them slack off because they know they aren't going to prosper even with the effort. And now with only 1 or 2 A's in the classroom, what happens to the average? Now it's not a C or a C minus, now it's a D or a D minus. And do you think the couple remaining A's are going to continue working hard to earn an A but receive a D minus? Of course not. Would you? And consequently, pretty soon socialism has brought equality to my classroom. All F's for every student.
Will you please stop with your false equivalencies and your gross misrepresentation of what socialism actually is? I feel like this guy's knowledge of socialism comes from the first paragraph about it on Wikipedia, along with a blog post made off by some pissed-off right-winger who thought that Obama was a fucking, hardcore Marxist.
Now, simply change grades to economic rewards, whether that's dollars or productivity, and you see why socialism fails every time. Without the incentive to prosper, which economic freedom brings, apathy will set in. And that's why socialism may spread equality, but it's equal misery to everybody that it touches.
Socialism fails every time, huh? Here I have the results of the first 5-year plan, an economic and industrial goal set forward by Joseph Stalin and the CCCP as a means of bringing the USSR, technologically speaking, out of the Dark Ages. Here are some of the results as explained by this piece. Before the first 5-year plan reached its actual conclusion, the Soviet Union was able to develop a tractor industry, an automobile industry, an aircraft industry, an iron and steel industry, and various other modern industries were developed within the span of only 5 years. The Soviet Union was able to convert itself from an agrarian nation into a highly industrialized nation.
For the proportion of industrial output, as compared with agricultural output, has risen from 48% of the total in the beginning of the 5-year plan period, 1928, to 70% at the end of the 4th year of the 5-year plan period, 1932.
This same piece also goes into how the process of the 5-year plan improved the material conditions and living standards of the workers and the peasants of the USSR, as it states in this piece.
In our country, in the USSR, the workers have long forgotten unemployment. Some 3 years ago we had about 1,500,000 unemployed. It is already 2 years now since unemployment was completely abolished. One of the principal achievements of the 5-year plan in 4 years is that we have abolished unemployment and have saved the workers of the USSR from its horrors. What is the 5-year plan in 4 years given the poor peasants and the lower strata of the middle peasants? It has undermined and smashed the kulaks as a class, liberating the poor peasants and a good half of the middle peasants from kulak bondage. It has brought them into the collective farms and placed them in a secure position. It has thus eliminated the possibility of the differentiation of the peasantry into exploiters, kulaks, and exploited poor peasants, and abolished destitution in the countryside.
This is only information in regards to employment during the first 5-year plan coming into fruition. Stalin goes further in detailing the improvement of material conditions for the workers and peasants, explaining some of the results that were yielded from reaching the principal achievements of the first 5-year plan. During the first 5-year plan, the number of workers and other employees in large-scale industry doubled in comparison to that of 1928, which actually exceeded the expectations of the first 5-year plan by 57%. The national income increased actually to 45,100 million rubles in 1932, which was an increase of 85% over that of 1928, which is phenomenal. The average annual wages of large-scale industry workers in the USSR increased by 67%, which exceeded the actual expectations by 18%. The social insurance fund of the Soviet Union increased by 292% in only 4 years. In 1928, there were only 1,050 million rubles within these funds. In 1932, those funds were up to 4,120 million. And finally, the amount of public catering facilities covered over 70% of workers employed in industry, which exceeded the expected results by a whopping 111%.
So why would anybody fall for this? Well, people gravitate towards socialism because they're told, either by professors that they trust or by officials that they worship, that it's fair. And we want to be fair.
Or it could be because, as the inherent contradictions of capitalism become more obvious and continue to cause problems that ultimately should not be happening at this stage of society, people will start to, question the system of economics and government that they live under. Then they research the internet about socialism and communism, they're introduced to the works of Marx, Lenin, and so on, and obtain an actual understanding of socialism, unlike this guy.
We all see the unfairness of our society. We all see hardworking people get screwed out of their retirement because the greedy dirtbag that's running the company decided to bail out with his golden parachute right before the crash. We know that isn't fair. We want justice for those people.
Then why the fuck are you still advocating for capitalism? If you're against people having to live in poverty, you're against discrimination, corporate greed, and government/economic corruption, how the hell can you still be an advocate of the capitalist system, which is inherently only able to function when those things are happening in a society?
In our desire for justice and fairness, we can't lose our minds.
You've already lost your head, man! You lost your head when you recognized and looked at all of the horrible things that are actual necessities for capitalism to function, express that you're against those things, and then say that you still support capitalism.
Yeah, it's true people in Venezuela, they don't have to worry about their retirement because they won't live to see it.
Nicolas Maduro is a socialist president, yes. But currently, due to how fucked the Venezuelan economy was before Hugo Chavez came into office, Venezuela still sadly has to function on more of a market system than a planned one. If anything, Venezuela would be a mixed economy.
Oh, but we're not talking about Venezuelan socialism, we're talking about Denmark or Sweden or Norway. Listen, those Scandinavian countries are not socialist countries at all. Shoot, they don't even impose a minimum wage there. They are free market capitalist societies that happen to have a very large welfare state. Big difference.
Well, I agree with you on that. Sweden and all those other such places are just countries based off of social democracy, which, as we've said before, is simply just slightly more regulated capitalism.
People that lose everything in America, of course that's tragic, but it doesn't change the reality that they are still better off than the vast majority of everyone in the world.
So people living in borderline poverty, working paycheck to paycheck and barely scraping by, or even being homeless and stuck without a job, insurance and whatnot, in America under capitalism, is somehow better than guaranteed housing, free healthcare, free education, increased living standards, and other such achievements in another country that's using socialism? What in the fresh fuck?
Why? Because capitalism and economic freedom give them the opportunity to escape. And if they don't, it allows others to prosper and be charitable towards them.
Is that why it took a shit ton of government involvement in the economy during the 1930s to bring people out of the Great Depression, because the so-called invisible hand of the free market doesn't exist, and therefore couldn't magically bring people out of fucking poverty? Now, granted, FDR was only a Democrat, but even so, if it wasn't for government regulation of the economy in the United States, we would have had to wait a whole lot longer before we got out of that whole financial crisis. Is that why so many of these charitable organizations and companies actually give fuck all to the causes that they claim to represent, and allow the heads of their, organizations and whatever to garner a shit ton of profit, all of which could have gone towards, cancer research or introducing clean water to villages in the third world? Is that why the former CEO of Nestle considers access to clean drinking water a privilege rather than a basic human right?
In socialist countries, if you're miserable, there's no way out. You get what you get with no hope for any change. And everyone else is miserable too, so there's no way they can help you up with charity.
Jesus Christ. You realize that life has historically improved for people while living under socialism. The life expectancy under Chairman Mao in China had risen up to 64 years by the time Mao died in 1976. In Dongping Han's book, The Unknown Cultural Revolution, Life and Change in a Chinese Village, it's detailed as to how during the Cultural Revolution, there were improvements in infrastructure, an expansion of public services, and so many other excellent things that happened for the benefit of the people while under socialism.
Many times they only survive because people from economically free countries, like ours, come to their rescue.
Well, I would say it's more like capitalist countries supply weaponry to and help build right-wing fascist regimes, which are then utilized to overthrow socialist governments, and in order to protect their newfound land of capitalism and neoliberal fuckery, the United States installs puppet governments, of which are highly oppressive, and result in the deaths of millions of people, all for the sake of maintaining a profit. See the likes of the Shah of Iran, or Augusto Pinochet. Well, that video was fucking terrible. This is why we need to work to educate the masses about socialism, comrades, because if we don't, reactionary, historically ignorant shit like this will be produced. It's 2017, and the fact that people are still buying into fallacious Cold War anti-communist propaganda is just depressing. There we have it, comrades, my first video response in relation to leftism, and I'm fairly certain this is going to end up being the longest video that I've ever released on my channel. Thank you for watching, everyone. I'm Jymee Casual, fuck you and bye.